Heyo, it's JayyJakk. This is another update as it pertains to my Wildcard Saga. The original video I can post in the link in the description. I was trying to get Ricciardo before the Monaco race, and there was a gap to pick him up. I picked up Schumacher so that I had as many people who were going to raise in sentiment before Schumacher was. But here is the problem. If I go here and I try to remove Schumacher and I pick up Ricciardo, as you can see, his sentiment bar is at 50. He has not raised in value, but if I try to add him as a driver, it says that I am negative 0.2 million. And why that is very odd is because I was at negative 0.3 million last week. Let me share with you, how does value for your team and subbing work? So here's the tracking. It's very blurry because this is a screenshot from my previous video. This is the only evidence that I have, and I shared with PlayOn to see how they could figure this out. My team value right after the previous race was 102.4 million, and it says the gap to pick up Ricciardo would be 0.3 million. Then here is my lineup with Schumacher to show that my team was valued at 102.7 million before today. Leclerc, Ocon, and Schumacher had all gone up by 0.3 million. That should be the 0.3 million gap that you need to be able to afford Ricciardo. The problem is that it says when I try to pick up Ricciardo, only Mick Schumacher's value going up counted towards being able to pick up Ricciardo, and I don't understand why that's the case. So it says that I'm now at 0.2 million gap to pick up Ricciardo, when I should be equal and be able to pick him up. And now, as of today, my team, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, is now valued at 102.9 million. Both Verstappen and Ocon went up another 0.1 million. So I've gone up a total of 0.5 million, and it still says that I have a gap of 0.2 million to be able to pick up Ricciardo. It is weird. Here's me trying to understand how this goes on, and this is through my Google spreadsheet. I have a tab called Price Point. On the top, you can see the team that I have, and the team that I want is beneath it. In yellow is Mick Schumacher and Ricciardo to show that the difference between the drivers that I'm trying to pick. This was right after the last race. My value was 102.4 million. You can see that at the bottom when I have cost cap. I could enter what my cost cap was. And it says that the gap to pick up Ricciardo was 0.3 million. If you go to the Monday after the race, my value went up by 0.2 million. Leclerc and Ocon went up. It still says that my gap is 0.3 million. So this is my thought, that there's something in the algorithm, both in my spreadsheet and on the website. The team value that you currently have is the ceiling. It's raising. So when it calculates, can you afford Ricciardo? It's not counting what your current team was and then what your team will be. It is only keeping it at to what the current value of your team is. It is very odd to try to figure this out. So that means as my team becomes more valuable, it thinks that I have to have more budget to be able to afford my team. So that means that the current cost of my team and the remaining budget, that's the problem, is what is my remaining budget? Let's go back to find out what my remaining budget is. It says my total value is 102.9 million. I have a team value of 92.8 and a remaining budget of 10.1. And I think this is where the problem lies, and you need to be aware of this. Even though my team value has gone up by 0.5 million, my remaining budget is still 10.1 million. And I would like some clarification from PlayOn if that is how that works, because that is very disappointing. How can you afford more expensive drivers if what allows you to afford those drivers is what your remaining budget is? I'm only allowed 3 substitutions, and I've already used 1 to pick up Schumacher. So how do I create a larger remaining budget so that I could then afford Ricciardo? It clearly says here, if you click on subbanks, allows you to make up 6 substitutions. Each time you save a team substitution, your sub bank is reduced by 1. But when you click on total team value, it says the total value is your team value plus your remaining budget. You can increase your total value by using your sub bank to add or remove drivers and constructors from your team. And elsewhere, it makes it sound like when you sub out your driver is when it locks the new cost cap. This is why this is confusing, because that means as your team value raises, you can't afford more expensive drivers unless your remaining budget is there. But your remaining budget, for whatever reason, does not shift. And that's why I want clarification. Back to my images. Leclerc and Ocon raised by 2.2 million. So that means my team value has raised, but not the remaining budget, which is why it probably still says that I have an outstanding balance of negative 0.3 million to pick up Ricciardo. Then Mick Schumacher goes up, and he's the one that I had subbed in for. So it tracks his value going up, and now the gap is a negative 0.2 million. So I'm thinking the only way to afford Ricciardo is if Mick Schumacher were to raise by 0.3 million before Ricciardo raises by 1. And that is the craziness of subbing. The driver that you're picking up, that's the person who affected your remaining budget. That is the person who's increasing your remaining budget. Because the issue in team value versus remaining budget, the only way it appears to be able to afford Ricciardo instead of Schumacher is to do my last two substitutions. And let me explain this. The remaining budget is 10.1. And if the gap to get Ricciardo is negative 2, I can't get Ricciardo by increasing my team value. I have to get Ricciardo by increasing my remaining budget. McLaren is 18.9 million, which is 0.2 million over Ferrari. So I would have to pick up Ferrari, which would now make my budget at 10.3. That is the only way to be able to actually afford Ricciardo. There you go. Now, if I drop Schumacher and pick up Ricciardo, I'm at a flat 0. Even though I raised in team value by 0.5 million, it's not the value of the team that allows you to afford more expensive drivers, but the remaining budget. So if you're going to want to trade a driver, you have to look at what is your remaining budget. So the only way to afford a more expensive driver is the first drop a more expensive person on your team so that you can get the budget to work in your favor. I hope though that PlayOn adjusts this, because I think team value, if it increases, that should allow you to afford drivers. But if that's how this operates, now you know. If it seems like you have an infinite, unreachable sliding scale, the only way to be able to afford that is to change your budget, not your team value, even though the two together makes up your total. You know, it is difficult. I know it's confusing, but I hope they are going to give us this clarification. Put your thoughts in the comments. Have you experienced something similar where you tried to get a driver and it seems like you can't afford them? How do you try to get your budget cap to switch around so you can't actually afford everybody that you want? And until next time, I'll see you on the pit wall. Peace.